Okay, so at this point, I'd like to go ahead and get started. So, as previously mentioned, my name is Jody King, and I am with the Alaska Procurement Technical Assistance Center, which is kind of silly to announce myself since one, you've seen our logo, and two, I've been talking at you, especially for those of you that have already signed in for the last couple of minutes. And what I'd like to bring to your attention, other than the fact that I am being very scrambled this morning. Actually, what we're going to do is pause, start fresh here. Okay, being distracted with technical. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So this morning we're going to be talking about using resumes to expand both your marketing and your proposal toolkit. And this is the topics that we're going to go over. One, I want to talk about why this particular topic, some of the things that made me decide that this is worth developing a workshop over. We're going to introduce Lori. We're going to talk about building a master resume system, capturing the data. We're going to discuss defining resume components, how to customize said resumes for intended use, resumes as a marketing tool, and cover letters. So while it seems like few topics, are really going to go into some great detail on this. So why this topic? I spent quite a bit of time working with clients in the 11 plus years that I've been with, and we've used resumes for part of proposal support documentation that showing the proof of ability, capability, experience, past performance, not only of just the company, but the individuals working within the company. I've also seen where resumes were used as certification support documents. And in the time that I have worked with PTAC, I hate to say it, but I've seen some really horrible resumes. In one case in particular, I was working with a husband and wife partnership that owned the company. The wife was the principal owner, and they were working on a woman-owned small business certification. And actually, I apologize. They were working on a DBE certification for the state of Alaska. And part of that supporting documentation was to provide a resume. And the resume principal owner, so for the woman owner, was to show that she was able, capable, had the managerial experience, and could run the company without the support of her husband. And part of this was the confusion of, in that husband and wife, I shouldn't say confusion, but in that suspicion that in that husband and wife ownership, that the wife was truly the owner and manager and not just put in that principal role in order to obtain certification, and it was actually the husband that ran the company. Unfortunately, they were denied that certification and had to go through a protest process and to get that resolved, because their supporting documents didn't truly support that the owner, even though she had the degree, she had the experience, and she truly was the one running the company, but the documentation didn't support that. And that really goes back to, again, one of those key documents being that resume. And as we've had that change with the Woman-Owned Small Business Program, the new certification with SBA that just opened a few days ago, having that resume as one of the documents. Same thing with the CVE certification. So there's multiple small business certifications where those resumes are critical. And if they're not well put together, it causes issues. And of course, we also use those resumes in that proposal support document. And often you'll see that as a requirement to show that the company has the right talent with the correct experience, that has that direct past experience to match against the scope of the project. And we're going to see some examples to be much more specific. So I'm going to pause just 1 second. I know Lori had dropped. She and I had done a practice run yesterday, and she was having a little bit of difficulty with her internet. So we're going to go ahead and give her just a moment to get logged back in. And we still don't see her. So as I was mentioning, the resumes are used for a couple of different processes. The one that we're the most familiar with when we say the word resume is for gaining employment. And even in that position for hiring in PTAC, we've seen some sad resumes that really truly didn't use the right keywords, that didn't tie their document back towards the scope of work, which in this case might have been employment versus applying against that. Oh, I see Don. I apologize, guys. I'm kind of delaying to give Lori a chance to get logged back in. Nothing like cricket sounds for you all, I'm sure. So Lori Kropodolsky has been with Autna for a few years now. She's got 28 years business experience with business development, proposal experience in the architect engineering industry. And she has been really helpful in developing this workshop. After working with a few people on that woman-owned small business and trying to help them get their resume so it was a more professional, more concise document, I realized this workshop was pretty critical, really needed. And I reached out to her to say, help me, how can I address this? What do you recommend? And she started defining how they use a master resume system. And as she was talking about it and showing me the examples, she volunteered to go ahead and present, which is why we are stalling, because the information that she had is absolutely fabulous. I'm going to assume everyone is back. Welcome. Lori, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourselves, please?
Oh,
Introduce
sure.
yourself, not me not say that as a plural. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. And sorry for the little internet snafu. Hopefully we'll get through the rest of this with no problems. My name's Lori Kropodlowski. I am the Senior BD Marketing Group Manager at Autna Environmental, and actually represent 5 of their key subsidiaries. I've got 28 years in the business and am certified through 2 different professional service marketing and proposal professional societies. So been doing this a long time. I was trying to think how many resumes potentially I've put together in 28 years, and the number would boggle the mind. So hopefully I can share a little bit of wisdom. I'm going to keep this pretty low level. I know there's some senior marketers out there. There's probably some new marketers out there. So if there's questions along the way, just let me know. And happy to provide whatever information I can provide you.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Thank you for saying hi, and thank you everybody for hanging in there. All right, so what we have in front of us is more of a flow chart of what we're going to talk about today. So as I had mentioned, we have that individual resume, that's that hiring document that contains individual work history, knowledge, skills. And today we're really going to talk about rolling that individual into an employee master resume that then rolls out to criteria specific resumes. Lori, do you want to add anything to the view in front of everyone?
Sure. So just kind of low level, you know, everybody is familiar with their standard hiring resume, which is normally a work history type resume. It may not go into specifics about a person's role in a specific capacity or go into great detail with projects. When we have new hires come on, and I've got example of a recent new hire that we've brought on that I'll show you in a minute, we translate that back into a master resume. And what I mean by the master resume concept is that it's never meant to be an off-the-shelf resume. It's more a repository that will grow over time. And so we're trying to capture all of their past performance when they're hired into their master resume. And then that master resume will grow with them over time throughout their career as they complete more projects and do more things. And then that gives us a one-stop shop to be able to prepare criteria specific resumes, which I have some examples as we go on here. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Lori. So what we're talking about when we say master resume system, and here is really more of the steps: the gather, the develop, the categorization, and breakdown into resume components. Do you want to go ahead and explain a little bit more of this, please, Lori?
Sure. As I was mentioning, the new employee would come on, or even employees that have been there for a long time. So not everybody uses a master resume system, and it can be pretty simple. And it can be in a Word format, which is what I'm showing you here. If you get more involved over time, and that's what Autna's doing now, we're translating our master resume system into a database, but that's not what we're going to talk about here. So we, take the individual's new hiring resume, bring it into a master format. That what's most important about that is that there's consistency in the formatting. As you can see in this graphic here, Autna has probably 170 different master resumes. So when we're choosing a team for a proposal, we might be picking 15 folks. We want them to come in as consistent and similar in style and look and format and active voice, all of those good things as possible. And so by having this master resume format set up with consistency, that helps. And then we create the employee folders, and this again is a sample, kind of just telling which company they work for, what their title is, where their location is. And then we break the resume into various components. And I think you could probably go to the next slide here.
Sounds good.
I will be bringing up our new hire, Clark Kent, his full original resume and master resume in a moment. But these are some of the standard plug and play sections that you would be looking to capture in again, a similar format. Everybody may have a different format that you're looking for based on, your clients best. But generally there's some type of narrative. We usually have bulleted list, we have a narrative form, we have some write-ups that might be slanted towards project management roles versus project engineering roles. They slightly differ. And so there's different options all in one document. And then there's education, registration, years of experience, those types of things. And again, we start out with a standard template that has the same headers, footers, art styling, shadow boxes, again, for consistency. And I think if we go
Sure.
to the next slide, is that where I give you a quick little preview? And
Absolutely. So, Lori, I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter. Just a
okay,
second here as we switch. You'll be asked to display your screen.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, we see your screen. You are good to go.
Great. So this is a recent new hire as of a couple months ago. He's actually a senior level new hire. I contemplated after the fact whether I should have used his, because as you can see, this is his hiring resume, and he's got lots of experience, which is what we like to see when we're marketing, because you can't market anything you can't document. So, but what this really is a work history. You know, he worked at Alaska, you know, from these years. This is a compilation, one paragraph of like 10, 12 different projects all in one paragraph. And then it goes on with different things that he's done throughout the years. What I wanted to show you was our potentially moving his original work history resume into what is Atna's draft master resume. And so, you know, we have certain nuances that we use active voice. We want full sentences. So we don't necessarily, you know, we take a little wordsmithing as we go into transforming their resume into our style. So we pay attention to the way it reads, but we put it into our template, and this is our typical template. Education, registration, similar to the graphic, stagnant graphic that you saw a bit ago. And then, you know, some different options of narratives, as I mentioned. This will grow over time, and I'll talk about that. But each time we do a new proposal and we write something custom, that's part of the full circle life of this process. Is you start with your master, you save it into a criteria specific document, you fine tune that, you give it to the employee, they fine tune it more and maybe write some great new project descriptions and rewrite their intro. You finalize it, tech edit it, use it in your proposal, and then you bring back those newly written items into your master resume. So it's growing over time, and each new time you go to do a criteria specific proposal, then you have more and more ammunition or tools in your toolbox to pull from. So Kent is, or Clark Kent is, you know, a new employee with us. You know, here is just a short narrative. We did a newsletter article, you know, who knows when I might need that again, but it's captured here for future use. Then we get into the project experience. And if you recall, I mentioned that Clark's work history resume had one paragraph which has about 15 different projects in it. Well, my task, and it seems a little daunting, but it's worth it in the long run, is I broke those apart into separate individual projects. Because for various reasons over time, say we're looking specifically for a slipstream heater project, and I want to use this, but I don't care about fuel gas lines, which was also in that paragraph, or I don't care about inspection work, which was also in that paragraph. Now all of a sudden I've got individual pieces, parts and pieces that I can play with and use in different ways. And so this first summary turned out to be probably a page and a half of project experience. And what I've done is I tried to put it into full sentences, active voice, and then I'm going to be sending this back to Clark to insert more narrative on the role that he actually did and that sort of thing. I did mention earlier that this is meant to be never meant to be an off-the-shelf resume. It's a repository, and you'll see a number of yellow highlights throughout this resume, including when we get to the projects, years that services were completed, the number of hours for that project, and we make note that it's personal experience prior to their joining OTNA. So it's fine for us to use on a person's resume their past experience, but it would never be ethical for us to claim this project as a OTNA project. And so we want to be very clear to whoever's looking at this that this is not an OTNA project. The years that services were completed, that's a requirement of a certain type of proposal, called a federal proposal called the SF 330. And I'll have an example of that, but we have that information so that when we're doing that type of proposal, we have the parts and pieces that we're looking for. You wouldn't think that you would need to know the hours, but actually one of our clients, the Core Alaska District, one of our IDIQ contracts with them do require that we provide how many hours that person worked on each project, and then we have to total the hours that that person has worked in whatever role we're proposing. So it's much easier if we capture this information ahead of the time frame versus when you're under a deadline trying to turn something in and then all of a sudden that person's not available or is busy and can't give you the information you're looking for. So these are the type of things that we're trying to capture in the master resume.
So Lori, let me ask you, do you wind up having under one title, say just scroll down just a little bit, you had, says let's just use that G055. Do you wind up having more than one format of the exact same project under one heading? So one might be narrative, one might be bullets. Do you often run into that where you might have it rewritten, but it's still the same project?
Good question, Jody. We often do. Now, at the very beginning of setting up someone's initial master, we'll go with a consistent style, which is what we're doing here. But as I mentioned, this is a circular process. It's a never-ending process. So say we extract this information out for a certain client's criteria and they are asking for, you know, a long description or a short description or a description that talks specifically about one slant or another. Say the project we're proposing on is Aleutian Island project with remote logistics. We might pull out a project and write specifically about remote logistics. That's very appropriate for that criteria specific project. And we wouldn't want to lose that. So what we would be doing here is when we, what I call dissect the proposal at the end, where I'm bringing back these parts and pieces into the master resume, and for that matter, master narrative, I will be giving various options. So this particular project over a year or two's time might have 3 or 4 different write-ups. with different slants. And I'll just put a little highlighted note. This is from, XYZ proposal 2020 with the remote logistics slant. And then when I'm going through for the next time, I have, again, just more tools and more text to pull from. Not that it's necessarily usable. Everything gets looked at before don't just extract it and not read it, because you're going to be looking at criteria to closely match the criteria and the language of what you're proposing on. And I'll be showing you examples of that as well. But yes, this will grow. There could be multiple write-ups for any one project over any given time.
So Lori, I do have one question from Danny. He wants to know, do you create and store different versions of a resume, or just have a single master resume you keep updating?
So I never want more than one master resume, because you get confused as to what was added to this master versus that master. It kind of defeats the whole purpose of what a master resume is, which is one place to look for all of your information. Now, as I create certain types of resumes, you'll see a few examples as we go forward. I will definitely save those types of resumes in their resume folder. For example, the SF330, which I'll show you in a bit. That's a very specific form, formatted in a very specific way. If you turn in anything but that form, they will give it back to you and say, sorry, Charlie, you didn't follow instructions. So I do keep other options. We have a table style resume, the SF330 resume, and then sometimes I do try to have what are off-the-shelf generic resumes for various reasons. I mean, sometimes you just need something quick and you don't want to go through and clean all of this stuff up. You don't want to have to, delete, get it to read right, get it spaced right, all of that. So I do usually like a 2020 corporate resume, which is kind of generic. It's not addressing any certain criteria, but it's ready to go if someone needs it to, go with a work plan for a project or for whatever need. It's something that can be used off the shelf.
Okay,
Does that answer the question, Danny?
I believe so. You can always just hit the raise hand button, Danny, if you have any more questions, or type up his response. Yep, you did. Thank you, Lori.
Okay. So that kind of covers, the master resume here. I'm in the midst of working on his master. You can see I've gone all the way through here trying to get his information into this format. And so I was a little afraid that this would be a little scary in that I chose someone that's so senior, that has so much experience. But believe you me, most people that come into your fold aren't going to have, it's not going to be quite so daunting. Someone right out of college, they might not have any project experience. They will just have the basis of, a basic summary, their education, registrations, maybe a project or two, or a lot of people will have, a page or two of projects. They're not quite so daunting as Clark Kent, who has 20 years of project experience. So don't let my examples scare you off too much. And the real benefit of this is over time. So over time, as it grows, as they are at Autna, it's going to continue to grow with Autna projects and Autna write-ups. And it really will be invaluable for you to be able to create reasonable drafts for your project managers and your staff to fine tune to the criteria. So,
So, Lori, I have a question. If you'd scroll to the top, to the first page of what you have on your screen. So for your general layout, what made you decide this style? Because we part of talking about that master template and having that consistent look throughout, and you have that gray column off to the side where you've pulled, you've separated that education certification from the overall experience. Was there a particular reason? Was it a stylized choice?
it was a stylized choice. And to be honest, when I started at Autna a little over 3 years ago, we had no master resume formats. And so now we have like 170 of them. At some point, you just have to pick something and go with it and build your library based on what you decide. So it wasn't me in a vacuum deciding, but we do use this font. And, one other consideration, this topic is not part of resumes, but our project descriptions. We have similar project description sheets that we build a library on, similar to this master resume library. Well, we use the same font. We've just kind of had to make a decision, decide we like it, run it by a couple people to get buy-in, and then you build on that library based on that. Now, if I
Thank
was
you.
all of a sudden told to change this, now I have 170 resumes to change. So.
After the adult beverages came out, and then, yeah, to change. All right, thanks. I just wanted to ask that question. So
sure. So I think that kind of covers the basics of building a master. I don't know if you want to move on to next slides and some real life examples of criteria of resumes.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and continue with your presentation on your, just at the criteria specific. I don't see any questions at this point, so go ahead.
We go from the original resume, build the master, and then we get a reason to build a criteria specific resume. Either there's a small business administration application that you're doing, or there's an award program that you're doing, or more often than not, for at least in my world, there's proposals going on. And so I have 3 examples here of a sample request for proposal that I just kind of wanted to zero in that you really need to fine tune each resume to maximize and connect the dots of meeting the criteria that's being asked for. So this was for a City of Atka health clinic that we proposed on. It was a construction project. And there's 2 things to think about. There's the submittal requirements and the evaluation criteria. So you have to look and follow the instructions to a T. In this case, the submittal requirements, they allowed a letter. They allowed the whole response to be 21 pages maximum. So you have to take that into consideration. Their resumes, they allowed 2 pages maximum each. Well, but in addition to the resumes, when you get to what they're looking for their team, the team is limited to 7 pages each, and you need a project manager, And you need in responsible charge for all their engineering and architectural functions. So if there's a mechanical engineer, you need someone that's registered in responsible charge. You need a resume for that person. You'd need one for electrical, mechanical, construction foreman, and superintendent. So quickly you realize I can't do a 2-page resume for each person because I would exceed my 7-page max. So you have to take that into consideration. Then you have to look at what they're asking for. They want specific duties and responsibilities and how that experience is relevant to them, not just off the shelf stuff. And they say that very specifically here. They say response prepared specifically for this proposal is required. Marketing resumes, those off the shelf resumes that I mentioned that, you know, I do have when they're needed, often include non-relevant information which may detract and are not useful. And then they go on and they say they also want some specific information and they want two references. So this is an example, and even though Clark's new, I use Clark's information here. Because the project manager is such a pivotal, important role in this project, I let Clark have, as project manager, have a 2-page resume. And they didn't have criteria really saying, with the exception of they wanted references, so I added the references here. And then they wanted very specific projects that correlate to the scope of work at hand. So this was a clinic. I'm trying to do clinic where I can. And so this is what I came up with for Clark. Now, another example would be, give me a second. One that we did for the Corps of Engineers, or U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Alaska District, for their HTRW project. Now this solicitation is 9 pages long, and not to scare you, some federal solicitations can be 300 pages long. But again, what as a marketer you're looking for is to zero in on the requirements of the submission and the evaluation criteria. So if you get something that's, you know, comes in a three-page or a 3-inch binder, that's for some of your technical folks to go through more so than you. You're looking for requirements and evaluation criteria. Now this says right off the top that you need to submit a SF 330. And some of you may or may not know what that is. I know there's some senior folks out there that probably can do an SF 330 in their sleep, but it's a specific format using specific, SF stands for standard form. So there's a standard form for their projects, standard form for their resumes. You submit anything but that standard form and they'll hand it back to you. So with this one, again, you know, they give you some basic project information. So, you know, gosh, they're doing site investigations. If I could find a project about that, that would be good. They're doing chemical sampling. If I could find a project with that, that would be good. So, you know, you do as a marketer need to generally know the project information and the scope. And luckily this one's a fairly short one. But we are going to, again, go to the criteria. In this case, the requirement was to supply everything in the SF 330 format. So there's actually books on submitting SF 330s, and there's lots of online help and online forms. You can download the forms online. So all of that is there, but that is the requirement that it be a SF 330. But here, the selection criteria, we start looking at some more specifics. They want 1 senior level program manager, 10 years experience, 5 years specifically related to investigation. So clearly you're going to be needing to customize your selection of who you're putting in that position to make sure that they follow and address the mail or answer the mail here in having that experience. Here you need 2 project managers, again with certain specific experience. You need a chemist, you need an engineer, geologist, 3 other minimum staffs, a GIS CAD. So you kind of know who you need, you know what their requirements are. So if you're putting up the SF330 and they don't meet that requirements, you know, you need to put up a red flag saying we need to select someone else. They don't meet the mail. Now I was just going to quickly show you what a SF330 might look like. So this is the standard form SF330, slightly stylized by OTNA with our OTNA blue and stuff. It's okay to change it. But you might recall in, so here we used bulleted lists because these are abbreviated resumes, sometimes limited to 1 page, sometimes not, in this case not, but still I wanted to put Clark's information in a bulleted form. Plus bullets are easier to comprehend and easier for the evaluator to read anytime that you're wanting to, you know, you want to make it as easy for the evaluators as you can. And, you know, this is the standard SF330 form. Now, when Danny asked earlier, do I go through and do an SF330 for all 170 people in OTNA? No. I do a SF330 form based on the same format for them when I'm doing a proposal. And so maybe I'm doing 20 people's SF330 for a proposal. I just don't have the spare time to go and just willy-nilly make up formats just to make up formats. But as I'm doing a proposal, again, at the end of the proposal, I will save this back into their folder. So you don't have to recreate every time, you just need to edit. And then I just have one last example and then we can move on. I know we're a little bit behind. This is another criteria, very, very different from the others. Many of you probably work for Department of Transportation in your states or with Alaska specific. This particular one is, bear with me, you know, they have a submittal checklist. That's kind of our requirements. And this particular one, the maximum number for the entire proposal is 10 pages long. And as you can see, when we get to the criteria, I've got to, in 10 pages, write objectives and services, methods, management. I have to have resumes for all of these staff, and they have to be Alaska registered. I have to work in workload, past performance, quality control, etc. So clearly, I can't do the same type of resume that I would do for a different client. This is more what I end up doing for a DOT project. It will be a paragraph form, and it will again, try to very clearly touch on their specific information. There's references required, so those are included. And this, I didn't spend a lot of time on this. I kind of just plucked it out. I would maybe give some project examples here that are relevant to the scope of work, but going back to the criteria, you know, I would need all of these people. And the other thing that you pay attention to is the weight or the grading or the scoring of any particular thing. And so one DOT project manager may score staff at 20, which is pretty typical, really. One might score it at 5, and they might score objectives and services as a 60. Well, then you'd put more of your time and page limits into writing towards objective and services and less into the staff. So you do kind of think about, gosh, staff is 20%. You know, there obviously I want a good solid resume, but you know, it's not, you know, it's if this was 50% weight, gosh, I better make sure that these are as good as they could be. And if 50% of 10 pages, I would potentially devote 5 pages of my 10 pages or 50% of the proposal to making really good resumes. So that is kind of 3 examples of criteria specific, again, proposal specific in this case, but that could again apply to small business administration things, applying for Engineer of the Year award. You might have a different, you know, different slant on how you do things. But again, you're always zeroing in on the requirements and the evaluation criteria.
So that's really fabulous, Lori. When for our attendees' information, when you and I were talking and you started showing, and then when you volunteered to present this, I was thrilled because it's a great way of showing, again, from the examples that you've provided here, going from your new hire resume, coming into the company, dumping that into a master format where you're disseminating, too many syllables for me to spit out this morning, breaking all those into different components, and then you're using that component to then address whatever specific end need. So we can see different styles, different function, and even if it's the same staff, paying attention to the criteria, those keywords. Any questions, anyone, while we still have Lori showing any of her examples? Okay, so Lori, I'm going to go ahead and take back the presentation to me so we can go back to our slides.
Great, thank you.
All right, fabulous. Everybody should be back at our PowerPoint. So what we want to just kind of wrap up with is I'm going to recap. So Lori gave us some really great examples and again, showing her work product. Thank you so very much, Lori. But we could see from taking our generic hire, again, pulling those components, creating that master format, and the really critical takeaway from the reason me deciding this was a critical topic to discuss is that customization of each resume to make sure that it fits that intended use. And Lori's mentioned it before, but even here, I want to call it again, we're connecting that dots. We're writing to respond to that proposal need, and we're looking at those factors that she showed you from 3 different proposal types to help define what should our end response look like. And I imagine that as she showed you using Clark Kent for that end result for each one, the last one might have been someone else, but still we could see that that format, that structure, and that being specific to that end need is really critical. So we're not using that same document over and over again. That one size fits all absolutely does not apply. Lori, do you want to add any comments to this?
I was just going to say the one thing I can guarantee you is your competition is doing that. So if you're not attempting to do that, they're going to score higher.
Absolutely. Differentiating yourself just by being responsive to what it was that the agency is calling out as their need. All right. So real quick here, I just wanted to touch on this because at the beginning of this, we talk a bit about, resumes, that hiring document, it's that proposal support document. And in my description, I talk about using resumes as a marketing tool. And I was talking to Lori about this and she's like, well, wait a second, company resume, don't you mean statement of qualification, or capability statement, those SOQ. And in essence, she's correct. So sometimes you'll see somebody asking for your company resume, and what they're really asking for is more of a statement of qualification. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I just kind of wanted to call that out to your attention. And again, a one size all doesn't necessarily apply. It's good to have for general, maybe if you're at just meet and greet. Again, even then, if you are at an agency meet and greet, you'll want to have things that'll highlight towards whatever that agency's goals and projects are. And there's a lot of great examples that you can find. PTAC has done a SOQ workshop previously, and I believe we'll have one scheduled again coming up this winter. But I just wanted to call that to your attention. And last but not least, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to just take a few minutes over, so thank you for everyone's patience. But Lori, do you want to talk about the use of cover letters?
Certainly. So to me, the cover letter, whether you're applying for a job or proposing on an award or a proposal, if it's allowed, it can be one of the most important documents that you will include if it's done right. So some proposals are quite lengthy, maybe 50, 100 pages, some not so long, but the cover letter is the first thing they're going to read. Now, if it's super generic and it just says, thank you for letting us propose, here's our proposal, we look forward to your answer, that's not a good cover letter. You might as well not include it. What you really want to do with a cover letter is define what your win themes are, which your win themes are meant to be why you're better than the other guy. What do you have that meets or exceeds the requirements and provides a near zero risk to the owner if they select you? You're trying to build confidence and trust that if they select you, their project's going to be successful. So you're trying to figure out what those win themes are. You're trying to build those win themes throughout your whole proposal, but the cover letter, a succinct cover letter that can hit on win themes, can be a very powerful tool. Now, with that being said, you need to make sure that, one, it's allowed in your submission requirements. It may or may not be allowed. For those DOT proposals, not allowed. Don't do it. It would be non-responsive. For that ATCA proposal, they allowed you a 2-page letter. If they were saying you can do one, but again, don't make it generic. You want to hit on win themes, and if they don't say whether it's required or not, they give you a page maximum, and you can work it in, and it's not generic, and it hits on win themes. I would do a cover letter every time. You want to hit on keywords. You want to hit on their evaluation criteria, that you meet the minimums or even better, exceed the minimums. And you want to paint the picture as to why hire you and not the other guy. It sets the stage for everything else they're going to read throughout the proposal. And some of these proposals, as much as we'd like to think that they read every word that we spend weeks of toil on, a lot of them they'll just skim. So when you can really connect the dots right from the start, I think a cover letter is really a great asset. So that's my 2 cents on cover letters.
Thanks, Lori. I know working with clients that I like to encourage cover letters, especially if they're small proposals, they're responding to an RFQ that might have been a combined synopsis solicitation where you have a commercial item, there's no formalized standard form being used, and those instruction to offers are like, well, you can use a form or you can just give us the information. And often in that case, then using that cover letter really gives you that opportunity not only to cover the things that Lori mentioned, your win themes, your criteria, but to pull in that information that you don't have a standardized form to fill out as well. So those cover letters can be really critical documents. And like a cover letter for a higher resume, make sure that your language and keywords in that match with your overall package. Not quite relevant to this, but thinking of the last time we were looking at a hire, we had here's the job title, and the resume said, or the cover letter is like, I'm really excited to apply for a completely different job title. And yes, that kind of colored negatively even before reading past that first paragraph. So just things to keep in mind. So
I wouldn't even read past the first paragraph.
yeah, well, HR said, but yeah, it's very daunting. So that's again using those off the shelf and not making sure that you're taking the time to look at all of your technical, looking at the resumes, looking at the cover letters, that it's really been polished to resonate the request. Why start off in a negative? So I do have a couple of questions. We are running over. If you guys can hang in there, if any of you need to go, I understand. But let me go ahead and get to the questions. This was really our last topic. So the first question, Danny again is asking, how many people are in your department to assist you on proposal creation and submission?
Well, that's changed since I've started. When I first started at Autna, it was 2 of us handling all of proposals and all marketing activities. That was handling 2 subsidiaries. We've since grown by 3 additional subsidiaries. And now we are fully staffed and actually restructured our department to better meet the marketing BD versus the proposal needs. So now we have a BD marketing staff of 3. I'm the group leader of that, and we have a proposal group of 4. So yeah, and that's really as of the last 6 months. We've grown our group substantially. We've grown substantially, and we're posed to continue to grow. So the need was there, but originally it was 2 people. And in past jobs that I've had of I've been doing this a long time, of firms 70 to 100 people, there was normally 2 to 3 people tops.
So we have one other question. There we go. I'm trying to get the screen to enlarge. So Bitsy is asking, she has 2 questions. The first one is, any time savings for getting from the master resume to the RFP specific resume? Who decides what project to include when the masters may have tons of projects listed?
Well, the more you work creating resumes, the better you get at it. That's where having a general understanding of the scope of work is important. So for the ATCA project, I knew it's medical, I knew it was clinic, I knew it was remote. And so I usually do the first stab of, gosh, here's a clinic, let's use that one. Here's a a loosened chain on the city of or island of Atka. That would be good to show remote logistics. So I do the first stab at that and I pull things forward. And sometimes if I'm really not sure, I will leave a lot of options, and I might like get rid of all the environmental jobs if it's a construction job, and just make some general kind of choices like that. But usually I do the first drafts, and then clearly it's fine-tuned, sometimes extensively by the staff member themselves.
So the second question Bitsy was asking is, can you speak to the database that you had mentioned you're considering transitioning to?
Sure. So we and I don't know if Denise is on the line here. Denise has been instrumental with us transitioning to database. But when I started, we did not have a what we call client relations management database, which could be used as a repository. We have been working for the past year and a half implementing a CRM called Cosential. There's lots of other options out there. There's Salesforce, there's Deltek options. I'm sure there's many others. And you could probably create your own if you had the wherewithal to do that. We started creating our own. Denise helped with that, just in an Access database to keep track of our all of our opportunities and pursuits. And then when we got the go-ahead to purchase Cosential, we transferred all our opportunity and pursuit tracking first to Cosential. Now we're in the midst of tracking. We have all our base information of our employees, their education, their registrations, years of experience, paragraph of who they are, what their title is in Cosential. Our next step, and one thing that we really didn't cover, is doing an annual review by staff of their master resumes to keep it current and fresh. And sometimes things change from a project description when it's first written to when the project is final. And the only people that can really do that is your staff members. So right now, Atna is in the process of doing a full annual review of all our 170 plus master resumes. And so we're going through and updating on the BD side. And within the next month or so, we will start rolling those out to staff for them to update and add new projects that we might not have captured. Then that master resume is going to come back to the marketing department. We'll do a tech edit and obviously run a spell check, those kind of things. And at that point will be the first time that we will be transferring all our project descriptions from the Word documents into Cosential. And so at that point, and if you're early in the process, believe you me, start with the Word documents because you have to start somewhere. But at that point, we will be able to generate our selection, our repository will be in the database. I would say that should be effective, by March of this next year. But it's taken us, by that time it'll be nearly 2 years into the process of implementing, fine-tuning the fields, figuring out the quirks, and obviously garbage in, garbage out is kind of the saying for databases. So we decided not to add our project descriptions until we went through this annual review of staff and did a full technical edit of everything so that it's not garbage in. It's going to be the newest, the best, the most updated information we can have before we put the actual projects in. And then for us, Denise has built up templates, and we'll be able to generate either a SF330 or any looking template that we want. We will be able to generate those out of the database.
So since we're kind of overrun our time, I'm going to thank you for the information, Lori, first of all. And I think the takeaway on that is, although you guys have graduated, you've defined your process, and now you're graduating from that Word as a software environment into that customer relationship management software. Still, don't feel that you have to start at that software, and as Lori mentioned, you can still start somewhere building those Word master files and using that.
I would add, in 28 years that I've done this and worked with master resume concepts, I've never gotten to the point where we had them in a CRM. So the place to start is certainly with Word documents.
So at this point in time, I want to thank everyone for your patience. We are at the end of our presentation. Again, takeaways: look at building that master resume system, gather those employee resumes, that master system, and truly the most critical is make sure that you are customizing those criteria specific resume documents, again, to match their need. So we're out of time. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions after the fact, it's usually what happens to me. I always think of my fabulous questions when there's no one around to ask anymore. Feel free to email those to me. You can respond to your email invitation, and I will be glad to forward any onto Lori where I might need that additional, or if you have questions for Lori, you can still go ahead and run those through me, and I'll pass those on to Lori. So at this point in time, again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I apologize for taking up more of your time than advertised. And again, thank you so much for your patience when we had that little bit of a technical at the beginning. I hope all of you have more information to think about for improving those resumes and strengthening your literature representation, that Word representation for your company's abilities and skills. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar. I'll leave this screen with the contact information up for just a few more minutes. And everyone have a fabulous day. Thanks, Kim. I appreciate adding the little thank you. And everyone, thank you again for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you, Lori, specifically for volunteering your time today. It was incredibly helpful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You bet. No problem.